No matter how many stories you hear about Uber or Lyft being unfair to its drivers, unfair to the passengers, there is always more you do not know about. This particular story right here certainly makes the blood boil. Nevertheless, it is very likely that neither the drivers or passengers even knew this was happening. This has been covered by a few other rideshare driving content creators, but I want to give my take on it because I do believe there's a hell of a lot to unpack here that neither the driver nor passenger is even aware of.
It's time now for What to Watch. Uber and Lyft let travelers reserve trips in advance, a feature that can bring up peace of mind to people hoping to ensure they make it to their destinations on time. But there is a catch. The service comes with an extra cost that some people aren't aware of. Clint Henderson, managing editor for The Points Guy, joins us now to help understand those costs. So, Clint, people just think that you want to book a ride tomorrow morning, let's say early, 6 a.m. Before you go to bed, you book the car in Uber. What's with the fee? What's the fee?
So essentially, they're not disclosing this fee ahead of time, and they're usually charging you more than it would cost if you just open the app and book the ride. So especially for those early morning rides in major cities like New York, you're going to pay more if you reserve the ride in advance in general. And those fees are not passed on to the driver. So it's sort of a double loss for you. And even if you reserve you're in a place like Detroit or Cleveland where there's not a lot of drivers, just because you reserve that ride does not mean that a driver is going to pick up that ride in the morning. So you have to be really careful using this feature.
Yeah, I have not had good luck with this feature. I know other people have, but what's happened with me is that I get accepted, everything's fine, I go to bed,
they don't come.
And then the next morning when I wake up, I see, it's been canceled. Right, so there's really no guarantee. But these fees, it's basically the same service, but in advance. You're requesting a car. Why do we have to pay extra for this? How is the company justifying this?
So the company says that you're paying for convenience, but as we just discussed, it's not always convenient if the rider just cancel on you. So I'm not sure what you're getting out of this. We're seeing more and more junk fees, as I like to refer to them. I think the President Biden is going to make this a campaign issue, but essentially Uber and Lyft prices have gone up, and those costs those prices are not being passed on to the driver. They're padding the bottom line for the rideshare companies. And so I think it's really interesting. We'll have to see. I think we've sort of come to a breaking point where the prices of Uber and Lyft are actually higher in many places than it is just to get a cab. So I think you're better off getting a cab in advance than you are trying to do an Uber or a Lyft reserve.
Yeah,
that's what it's like in New York.
Yeah, this would give me agita because there's nothing that I hate more than booking for peace of mind and then waking up
to be stressed.
Yeah. So I'd rather just try to do it in the moment. You say that the drivers are not benefiting from these fees. Let's talk about the 20% of Uber's airport pickups that are reportedly now from rides reserved in advance. So is that the target audience, people who need to get to the airport because presumably there's a time crunch?
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think people think that they're gonna lock in a price, they're gonna lock in a reservation, and that's not really the case. Essentially, they're just paying more for a service that may or may not be there. And remember, if you're paying more for the ride, you're less inclined to tip the driver. So it's actually not great for the driver either because the rider figures, I'm already paying so much money. A lot of this must be getting passed on to the driver. And that's just not the case.
All right, Clint, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Booking reservations, being charged an undisclosed fee. So you're flying out tomorrow at 9 a.m. to make sure you arrive at the airport on time. You're going to book your vehicle, book your Uber driver this evening at 7 p.m. Uber and Lyft are charging undisclosed fees to the passenger that's booking their trip ahead of time. Nobody else is getting passed on any of the proceeds. And make no mistake about it, there's no legitimate reason why the passenger's being charged extra money to begin with. They're not getting anything extra. At the end of the day, as you saw in the news clip, you're not guaranteed the driver's going to show up. Yours truly, I don't really deal with reserved rides, particularly at airports. Simply put, there's no value in doing them. I got to drive 5-10 miles outside of town at my own expense to the airport, and there's no guarantee of anything extra for me to do it. So the undisclosed fee is going to Uber or Lyft No driver is profiting from that at all. So what is the incentive for a driver to be available when you actually need your trip? Which is why they're stating in the video, even if you do this, there's no guarantee anybody's going to show up. Now, I don't do airport trips for the simple fact is when passengers come into the city, you don't know where they're going. And we talked about this in other videos. We won't cover it too much here, but there is no benefit to doing long distance trips with Uber or Lyft. And most passengers flying into the airport, airports cover a large geographical area. Most airports cover 5 or 6 counties surrounding them. So you don't know where that person's going. You pick up somebody at DFW, they may be going to Dallas, they may be going to Fort Worth, hell, they may be going to Denton. You don't know. And you got to make that whole trip back at your own expense. So I don't know. I don't deal with airport trips anyway. So a lot of these reserved trips, you're not going to get me because I can see the fakes up front. But I don't believe the passengers knew that none of the extra fee goes to the drivers. Not to mention, as they say in the video, a hell of a lot of folks didn't know the fee even existed. Now, here is what just makes it worse. In addition to the driver not getting any of the fee, this could lead to some passengers being a bit disgruntled because the trip is costing more than a traditional trip because of the fee. And because they don't know the driver's not receiving any of it, it may make them less inclined to tip. So here the driver is trying to provide a convenience of answering your reservation, being available the next morning or whenever you've reserved a trip. And because the trip costs more, you're less inclined to tip the driver as much or anything at all, when in reality, the driver don't benefit from any of this. He's not getting any of the reservation fee. And if you feel a tad bit disgruntled and tip less, you're hurting them more. As drivers, I'm speaking to my veteran drivers, I'd advise avoiding these trips to begin with. I'd advise not even doing them. If we are aware up front that Uber or Lyft are earning extra money for something and passing zero of it on to drivers, those particular jobs you should avoid at all costs. I mentioned this with Uber Health, when they're using your vehicle as a pseudo ambulance or medical transport to pick up folks to take to and from hospitals and clinics. They're getting extra money on the side for that. None of that is passed on to the drivers. Avoid doing trips where they're pocketing extra money and passing on none of the proceeds. Because as we stated with reservations, it could lead the passengers to be a bit more disgruntled because the stuff costs more. The drivers are getting none of that. So don't answer that stuff. That'll give them an incentive to either pass some of that on to the driver, lower the fees to the customer, or a combination of both. Oddly enough, in this video, you see they state that prices are going up in ride sharing. And in some cases, it is almost cheaper to take a traditional taxi. Us drivers earn significantly less than what taxi drivers make. Rideshare drivers make a hell of a lot less. So that really goes to just simply show you how much money Uber and Lyft are pocketing from the fares. When Uber and Lyft got in the game, the goal was to provide a much lower cost transport because the taxis were not fulfilling its duties to the public. So you could catch an Uber for about a third of the price. The drivers were making significantly more than they do now as well. So what has happened? The cost of trips has went up substantially. The pay to drivers has went down significantly. Uber and Lyft are the ones making a fortune out of all of this. And we've shown you articles coming from both Derek Costashawi, the CEO of Uber, and Risher, the CEO of Lyft, all over the place bragging at how well the stocks are doing. They're making a mint at both the customer and driver's expense. Avoid doing reserved trips. If you know that trip was reserved, avoid doing it. Take trips that people are booking. I would highly advise to just avoid doing it altogether. That's not to say that Uber or Lyft may not try to game the system by giving you reserved trips without even telling you it's reserved. Nothing you can do about that. They control the app. They control all of the data you receive. This is what I'm talking about. Lack of transparency. But while you know, don't take trips involving any service to passengers where you feel either confident or you suspect that Uber and Lyft are charging that customer an extra fee or some type of extra sum and passing none of it on to the driver. Do not help them rip both you and the driver off. Have you seen any other examples in your market of Uber or Lyft providing some form of a trip to passengers, potentially charging them a little bit of extra money on the side where you feel confident as a driver you're getting none of that, and as they said in this video, could also affect your tip because the passengers are not happy they're paying more? State it in the comments. We need to know all of this stuff. What the hell we need to avoid. This is where the transparency comes in, folks. As always, subscribe to the channel. Feel free to smash that like button. Uber on. See you in the next video.